Good afternoon. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you joining today. Our topic is to discuss about fintech in France. Before we start, what I would love to invite everyone before we start is to name yourself, because apparently we are not able to look at your name. So if you could put your name on the screen so that we can, see who are our guests. Because apparently everybody is called Contemporary. So I welcome every of our guests to put your name on the chat. Thanks a lot, and I will start. So it's a great pleasure, and I extend a very warm welcome to all of you joining today. Our topic is to discuss about fintech in France and how the ecosystem is changing and how fast growing companies are expanding their business in France. This is a fascinating and very fast changing topic, and we'll have the chance to hear the views from great speakers, from regulators to entrepreneurs. It's a pleasure to be your host. I'm Chema Nguyen, and I'm the co-founder of CFT. For today's topic about France, I also wear the hat of board member of the Business France French Tech program and board member of EDEC. This event is co-organized by Business France, Ambassade de France au Royaume-Uni, La French Tech, and with the support of CFTE. For our agenda today, we'll have the honor to hear from Cédric O. We will then welcome the French ambassador to the UK, Catherine Colonna, then dive into two panel discussions. The first one will be about the general context and attractiveness of France as a fintech destination. And the second one will be about to share more light on the real experience of fintech companies who have actually set up their activities in France. We'll have great speakers, and I invite you to ask questions and make the session very interactive. So please feel free to address your question on the chat. Without further ado, let me invite now a video and a few words from Cédric O, the French Minister of State for the Digital Transition.
Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Cédric O. I'm the Minister for Digital here in France. I'm really happy to have the opportunity to take the floor in front of you today during that seminar that is set up by the French Embassy to talk to you about fintech in France. There are basically two reasons why you should consider investing in France. The first one is the current dynamism of the French tech ecosystem. We've seen lately some kind of explosion of that ecosystem with a huge rise of the emergence of unicorn, of fundraise in France. And for example, we have been able to multiply by 4 the amount of money that has been raised by our startups between 2017 and today. So we are back in the race, and fintech is a part of that. We've seen the emergence of Conto, of Alan, of Alma, of October, of United. A lot of fintechs are now growing in France and taking benefit of the huge European market. And this is the second reason, size of the market. We've been able to attract a lot of the big financial firms from the city here in France, winning to some extent the race with Frankfurt because of the size of the continental market and of the European market. If you want to grow big, if you want to address the global market, you need a big market. And we have in France the right ecosystem with actually the regulation and the power and the reputation of the regulator, but also the financial ecosystem that allows you to grow your business here. Those are a lot of reasons why you should be considering investing in France. You'll be having a lot of questions, and I'm sure that the embassy team, but also my team, will be able and
Thank you. Thank you so much to Cédric O for his words. I would like now to welcome the ambassador, Her Excellency Catherine Colonna, to give her introduction remarks.
Good morning. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be with you and so happy that Mr. Cedrico took the time to deliver a special message to this webinar. So congratulations for that. I would like to warmly thank you also, Madame Guen, you and your team for organizing this event and for inviting me today. And welcome all the participants in this seminar. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to exchange with fintech experts and with English startups. And I'd like to hear your views and perspectives on the current outlook and on the challenges ahead. I hope we can meet in person soon, but I'm sure I'm not alone expressing that desire. We've been too far away anyway for too long. So what is the situation? 9 months after what I call full Brexit has become a fact of life, and we start to see more accurately to what extent it affects the way we live, the way we trade goods and services, and in particular financial services, especially through innovation, thanks to startups like yours. We also have an agreement on the future relationship between the EU and the UK, which provides a basis for the deepening of relations between these two entities. I don't call the EU a bloc, by the way, please don't call the EU a bloc, it is the European Union. But anyway, we have that framework and we have to keep it alive and fully implemented going forward. I make no reference to current events, but you know that sometimes a little bit too shaky, much more than we would desire. With regard to the financial services, we also agreed on an MOU, which understandably does not cater for market services, but offers a useful platform for dialogue and information sharing, very, very similar actually to what exists between the EU and the United States. So it should work, it has to work. We absolutely welcome the fact that it is there. We must use it. Second, a few figures to remind us that beyond this new institutional backdrop, our relations remain preeminent. The UK was the third leading investor in France in 2020 and the second largest source of jobs. It's a fact. In 2020, France was the leading European recipient of British job creating investment, attracting 24% of British projects in Europe, which is the same level as Germany, 12%, and Spain combined. This is a fact. And finally, the UK led 90% of all investment recorded in the financial services and insurance sector in France. This is a fact. So as you can see, France has deep ties and will continue to have deep ties with the UK, including important commercial and financial interests. And we have so many key issues to tackle. I would briefly and finally also like to add some figures on the French ecosystem. It was presented to us by Cedrico, but I want to stress, as the French ambassador to the United Kingdom, that France is a place open to business, and it is a breeding ground for talents. It is the leader in Europe for R&D, that's the 2019 figure, we don't have the 2020 figure, both in terms of expertise and in terms of spending. As of today, in Paris alone, there are 700,000 students, many of whom are world-class engineers, researchers, scientists in training, mathematicians, not me, by the way, but we're quite good at that. Paris is also a huge concentration of startups and infrastructures with 50 accelerators, 300 incubators, including the famous Station F, which is the biggest European incubator. In this regard, I'm very much looking to your discussion on the opportunities that France has to offer regarding fintechs, whether in terms of the regulatory environment or subsidies to support projects, but also on how to successfully set up your operations in the EU and in France, preferably in France, needless to say. Last week, historical fundraising shows that the Parisian marketplace continues to attract fine talent and that France is a great place to grow a startup. That's my message of the day. I welcome your discussions and hope you have a very fruitful conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you for your time, Madame l'Ambassadeur, and for joining us. Thank you for your message. This was extremely insightful. Before hearing from our esteemed speakers, let me give...
Sorry.
We are hearing you. Thank you for your time, Madame l'Ambassadeur, and for joining us and for your message. This was extremely insightful. Before hearing from our esteemed speakers, let me give the audience some general background about today's discussion. With my hat of co-founder of CFT, we have the chance to be involved in the global fintech ecosystem in London, and of course, where we started, but also with our offices in Singapore, Hong Kong, Abu Dhabi, and also France, of course, where we are just launching now. As you know, fintech has been a very fast growing industry with more than $200 billion invested in the last 10 years. In practical terms, it means that more than 150 fintech unicorns, which means companies worth more than £1 billion. But it's much more than that. It's really not just about fintech startup. For us, it's all about the financial services in general. 10 years ago, the 10 largest financial institutions in the world were all banks. All 10 of them, mainly American and Chinese banks. Today is totally different. Do you know how many are banks in the top 10? So do you know how many are banks in the top 10? Yes, not 10, only 5. There are now 5 non-banks in the top 10, which are platforms and payments companies. We can name Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, On Group, and Tencent. So finance has changed, and fintech is not this confidential small sector anymore. It has changed financial services and society in general. And finance is actually becoming fintech. Since I run an educational platform, my lens for fintech is, of course, through people and how we have people ready for this new world of finance and fintech, and in all the worlds, the importance of upskilling or reskilling. This is common knowledge. Lifelong learning is now something that everybody should do, both individuals, but also organizations and governments. Our experience at CFT, this is very unequal. Some countries, of course, put a lot of focus on this. From Singapore, where the banks train all their employees in digital skills, or Hong Kong, where we work with the government to upskill the financial sector, or Abu Dhabi. But if I wanted to be a little bit provocative, but much needs to be done in our old Europe and done urgently if we don't want to fall behind. So it's just amazing that we have sessions like this today to hear from great leaders and how France is taking the fintech opportunity. And I'm looking forward to amazing exchanges. It's now with great pleasure that I will be welcoming our first panel to discuss about attractiveness, reforms and regulations, and support from innovation in France. Our speakers, and I welcome them, will be Domitil Dessertine, Head of FinTech Innovation Competitiveness at IMF, and Thomas Ernu, Deputy Head of the Economic Department at the French Embassy in the UK. It will be moderated by Huiyuan Chiu, co-founder of CFT, and Hui bridges the worlds of fintech, banking, and academia, having been founding partner of the largest fintech accelerator in Asia, a managing director at Citi, and launched the fintech courses of Oxford Said Business School. Let me now welcome our panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Traman. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you. And for our topic today, that will be around the attractiveness, reforms, regulation, and support for innovation in France. So a lot of topics. And for this, I am being joined by two great speakers, and let me introduce them. Let me first introduce and welcome Domitille Desatines. So Domitille is the head of the Fintech, Innovation and Competitiveness Division at AMF, the French securities market regulator. She was, in terms of her experience, she was involved in the money market fund reforms, joined the Asset Management Regulation Division at IMF in 2013, if I'm right, and joined the Fintech Innovation and Competitiveness team in 2016, and where she's responsible for supporting innovative companies and thinking about the need to change regulatory framework. Because of her role, she's also very involved in crypto assets, and she's an alum of Sciences Po and has a PhD in finance from the Sorbonne. So welcome, Domitille.
Thank you, and welcome. Hello to everyone.
And let me also welcome Thomas. So Thomas Ernu is Deputy Head of the Economic Department at the French Embassy in the UK. He worked for the ACPR in France, responsible for supervision of the banking and insurance sector, then joined the Treasury as Deputy Head of European Strategy and Coordination, and then Deputy Head of the Banking Affairs Unit. He's a lecturer at ENA and Sciences Po and an alum of ENA. Welcome, Thomas.
Hello, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Glad to be here with you.
I think with both your experience, we will have an amazing discussion. Let's make this session very, very interactive. So don't hesitate to ask questions or comments. If you'd like to ask questions, use the Q&A part of Zoom. And if you find a question really interesting, upvote it. So we'll see what are the most interesting questions, and we'll take them as we go along. But first, since we'll be talking about France, I know that not all of you are in France. So where are you based? We have a big audience today. Where are you based? So if you can just put in the chat your location, that'd be great. So we'll have a good idea of who are the people in the audience. So we have London, so just like me, UK, London, France, London, Ireland, Dublin, great. Berlin, soon expanding to France, that's great. London, Turkey, London. We have so many contemporaries today on the call. Great, so quite a few people from London. We have some people from Ireland, Germany, as far back as Turkey. So great. So welcome to all of you. So let's talk about this topic. And I'm based in London, and from our view in London, and of course we follow France a lot. And it seems that quite a few things are happening, but it's hard to know what is really happening, because over the last few years we've seen a lot of initiatives in France about fintech. And one of the lens that I would like to take is a very simple lens, but that's about fintech unicorns. At CFT, we like to hunt for fintech unicorns. So we have this observatory, and we look at all the unicorns in the world. As Traman said, there's almost 200 fintech unicorns in the world, from huge companies like Square or Stripe. And what we saw this year, actually, is that we're starting to see those fintech unicorns appearing in France. We started to see them actually in 2021, and we saw very quickly 4 of them appearing. Shift, Ledger, Alan, Sora, recently. It seems like more are coming. So what is really happening in France? And perhaps my first question would be to Thomas. And Thomas, could you give us an overview of what is this French fintech ecosystem? What is really happening for fintech in France?
Yes, thank you, Rui, to give me the opportunity to say a few words on the landscape in France. And obviously, the ecosystem is thriving. As Raman said at the beginning, fintech in France is no longer a niche, by no means, within the financial services sector. In France, the sector has gone from strength to strength in the last couple of years, and it has prospered on an extremely fertile ground, I'd say, also because of the strengths of the incumbent financial services sector, in particular with Paris being, a multi authoring financial hub in the EU, with high volumes of transactions in lots of compartments of the financial sector. So it's probably also one reason why the fintech sector in France is growing. Just let me give you perhaps a few numbers, a few figures, just to illustrate these strengths. 2020 was, of course, for many reasons, a very difficult year. But for fintechs in France, actually, it was a record-breaking year. Obviously, the second quarter was perhaps harder than the rest of the year. But overall, it's been for our fintechs a year where we've seen a very high volume in terms of fundraising compared to the previous years. Almost 850 million euros, sorry, raised last year for 63 operations. It's an increase, an increase of 18% compared to the previous year, 19. And it's so 130 million euros more than last year, and 400 million euros more than 2018. So a lot of fund raised last year, and the market actually proved much more resilient, and that's another point I want to stress. Much more resilient compared, for example, with the UK or Germany, where the markets there registered actually a decrease in terms of fund raised. So clearly better than other markets, clearly better than the European markets overall, where the decrease has been about 7%, sorry, in terms of fund raised. And this year is already 2021, a great year in terms of fund raised. First semester was excellent. We've seen a lot of success stories, and with a lot of announcements around fund raised already in the last couple of months, with 68 operations and 1.5 billion euros raised. So already 3.3 threefold the amount raised in the first semester of last year. So it's amplifying. The trend is obviously very good. And when we see more in details the flows and the flows of transactions and what it means that probably the market is reaching some maturity. We see it when we look at the average ticket. It's now about 22 million euros. So it's plus 44% compared to last year, first semester. We see also, it's interesting, a rise in terms of transactions above 50 million euros. There are 7 of them in the first semester of this year. And we also see an increasing number of operations, Series B operations, with 15 operations of the kind, totaling 1.1 billion euros. So it's a landscape that's growing. It's growing fast. It's now a sector that represents 25,000 people, 7 companies overall. New unicorns are joining the group. You mentioned Alan, Shift, Ledger, among others. So it's a very fascinating landscape, and we really hope that among our audience we will find the next unicorns and the next success stories to join the fintech sector in France. I stop here, but happy to develop if need be.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. That was super insightful. And Domitil, you have been in that space for a while, so you're seeing all the trends of the ecosystem. What have been the main changes that you have seen over the few years? Perhaps some of the big trends, some of the discussions that you're seeing from all those fintech startups. What is notable?
Right, thank you, Rui. First of all, I should apologize because I have a sore throat, so I hope you can hear me well. Well, yeah, as you said, Rui, actually my team, the FinTech Innovation Competitiveness team, was created back in 2016 already. So 5 years ago, which in the FinTech space is a very long time. And we've met over the past 5 years with, roughly speaking, 650 companies, both French and foreign, but also startups and large groups. So I guess we can say we have quite a good overall picture of what is going on in the financial services industry, at least. So I'm not speaking about insurance or payments, as it's not in the remit of the MF, but I'll explain that a bit later. Well, I guess what we can see are roughly 3 main trends. So the first one is what we call the platform trend. Basically, it's a trend that is not necessarily very visible in Europe yet, but that is very present in Asia, for instance, and in the US also. And basically, it consists in the creation of real integrated ecosystems, some sort of a one-stop shops, if you like, where the buyer can come and buy some ESG products, some crowdfunding products, perhaps buy some cryptocurrencies, make some micro investments. So it's sometimes some ecosystems that can even go beyond the pure financial services sphere. For instance, in Asia, I'm thinking where you can basically do your grocery shopping and then invest in saving products. So this is something that really challenges as regulators, because it's new way of marketing products to investors, of course. So that's the first trend I wanted to mention. The second one is about automation, and behind that, it's the increased use, of course, of data. It's a very strong trend, I guess, that we can really see across all the financial industry, but also beyond financial industry, for all types of different services. And it has been developing thanks to a number of tools that are more or less sophisticated. So I'm thinking of, for instance, the cloud, big data techniques, RPA, machine learning, and in the near future, probably quantum computing will also make a significant change. And there, in this automation phase, we have different stages, and the feedback that we have from market players is that we have had a first phase, let's say, of cleaning up basically the data. So be aware of what types of data you own, what you can do with it, have some constitute some databases that are clean and that can be leveraged upon, and perhaps some data lakes. So that was the first stage, and I guess some of the market players are still in that first stage. And the later stage is, after this cleaning up phase, is really increasing the use of data to automate, I would say, low value added processes. So that is what is going to come next, and it has already started, actually. So it's also an interesting trend that really spans across all the financial industry. And the third trend I think we identified is what we call the tokenization trend. So basically here it's the use of DLT technologies, so shared technologies with the view to modernize and to speed up really the financial transactions and modernize the financial infrastructure, both the trade and perhaps even more post-trade infrastructures. So that's also interesting and raised quite a lot of challenges for us as regulators.
Thanks a lot, Dimitri. That's super clear. During our prep meeting, I said, I would learn a lot of things. I'm learning a lot. So thanks a lot. And you mentioned, for example, platforms. That's amazing because, of course, platforms is something that we see a lot, from Asia, going across the world. But for example, I didn't know that, that was the first trend you'd be talking about in France. So this is also happening there. And you mentioned, Thomas, the acceleration, which I think we see, even from here, we see the acceleration in France. Why is that? Is there some reasons? And I guess it's a question to both of you. Is there some reason why we're starting to see this acceleration of fintech in France, especially this year and last year?
Do you want me to go first, Louis?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, that's a good question indeed, and of course there is no single, answer to that. It's probably a mixture of a lot of things. Probably just let me mention a few elements that could explain or shed light on the current very positive trend we observe in France in the space of fintechs and of startups in general. It's probably linked to the sustained efforts by the French authorities. It's been a couple of years that reforms and measures to support have been decided and implemented by the French administration, the French government, the French authorities, and it's probably bearing fruits now, and it's growing. It's linked to the labor market reforms to make the job market more nimble, make it more predictable and easier for firms to know, for example, what the ultimate cost would be if they had to decide to dismiss people, just to mention that single example. It's also the way the French government has modernized its tax framework. We've made a lot of reforms in terms of lowering, for example, the corporate tax in France with a very ambitious path, taking down the rate from 33% to 25% next year, but it's already quite low today, as you know, in 2021 it's 26.5%. So it's a very much in line now with the Europe average, and very much in line with UK rate, following the announcement by the Chancellor here in the UK to bring down the rate to 25% as of 2023. We've reduced the social contributions by 6 points on the lower income, up to about 3,800 euros per month gross salary. We've secured, and I'm sure it's going to interest or to appeal to our audience, we've secured our R&D tax credit, which is dubbed by the OECD as one of the most efficient and generous schemes in Europe, in advanced economies. It enables entrepreneurs, firms, especially startups, but not only, to deduct from the tax 30% of their R&D expenses, up to 100 million euros, and 20% for innovation activities for SMEs, up to 400k euros. So I could go on and on about all the measures and tools, and I'm sure we'll touch on that in the Q&A. But to sum up, perhaps at this stage, I'd say that there's a strong commitment by the French authorities to support the companies, the entrepreneurs, to make our environment business friendly. This sustained commitment and associated with bold measures probably helped entrepreneurs, firms to choose France as their nest, I'd say, to grow and expand in the rest of Europe.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Thomas. And so that was a great answer, really at a high level. I see quite a few questions, so that's great. If you can just put your questions in the Q&A and upvote the question that you find interesting, and we'll take the most upvoted one. And Dimitri, what's your view on this?
Well, I very much share what Thomas has just said. I think the recent enthusiasm for France is actually a very good signal. I guess it's also the results of many years of strong efforts put towards entrepreneurs and startups, because let's face it, for quite a few years, I guess France was not really seen as the paradise for startups, and I think this has completely changed. This negative image that we used to have abroad really changed, and that's a good thing. So I hope it will continue in the years to come. So no, it's really a good result.
Thanks a lot. So I'll take some of the questions. Some of them are quite direct questions, but I guess if we have entrepreneurs on the line, then they will ask very direct questions. But I guess we have a question from William, and a few different points in terms of regulation. And France is seen generally as a tricky country, perhaps not business, no friendly country. And his question is, why put your headquarters in France rather than in an easier jurisdiction like Ireland or Netherlands? So any views on this, from either Thomas or Dimitri?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say the first thing that comes to my mind, and I think that's the great advantage of France, is really the dynamism and the quality of its ecosystem. And Her Excellency, the ambassador, mentioned it, but Paris is rich in terms of infrastructures. It has large banks, it has large issuers, large investors. It has a significant pool of savings. It also has serious regulators, which I think all of this makes it a very attractive destination as compared to perhaps some other European countries.
Thanks a lot, Dimitri. Is it a question you'd like also to answer, Thomas? Otherwise, we have a lot of other questions.
I think that Dimitri gave us, a perfect summary of why you should all come to France to expand. But I would really emphasize, on the approach we've taken, government, regulators, supervisors, to simplify how entrepreneurs can create and flourish in France. Be it startups, but also other entrepreneurs. It's what we've done, with the PACT legislation. It's a business action plan and transformation plan, and it's testament, I'd say, to the ambition of the French government to just streamline processes, to get rid of hurdles that in the past indeed was making it more difficult for entrepreneurs to create enterprises in France.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. We have around 15 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, please ask them. And I'd like to ask a question to Dimitri, because now as a fintech entrepreneur, the first question, of course, is regulators. This is no part of the business. Who are those different regulators in France? There's AMF, ACPR, Banque de France. Who should you deal with as a fintech entrepreneur, and what do they do?
Sure, it's a very good question, actually, because it's true that from outside it can be a little bit difficult to navigate through all these different bodies. Well, very very concretely, depending on the type of activity that you carry out, you may be in touch either with the ACPR or with the AMF. So broadly speaking, the ACPR is the competent authority for everything that relates to banking services, payment, or insurance. And as for us, the AMF, we're really the Securities Markets Authority. So we're in charge of anything that relates to financial instruments. So be they portfolio management companies, investment funds, broker-dealers, trading venues, listed companies, crowdfunding. So I guess this is the first thing that you need to have in mind if you want to set up in France. Second thing, and I think it's an important point to note, we've recently modernized our website. So if you want to set up a company in France, I would strongly advise you to look at it, because really our goal was precisely that foreign players can quickly find the information they need to obtain a license in France. So I really invite you to take a look at these elements, which are obviously available in English. And if you have any questions, my team is really here to help. We provide support precisely in these pre-licensing phase, and there is a similar team that exists within the ACPR that provides the same kind of support. So don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Great, I think it's a message which has been well received. Some important regulatory initiatives in France. What would be some of the main ones that people should be aware of?
Well, there's a lot of activity in terms of regulation. I guess the latest biggest one was the creation of a whole regulatory framework for crypto assets, and we are one of the first countries to really have a comprehensive schemes in that area. So this has taken us quite some time, and I think it's a good example of how we reach out and interact with fintechs, because actually that framework was built in cooperation with different companies that came and see us at the fintech team and ask us precisely whether they needed to be regulated and which type of regulation they would fall in, and so on. Actually, it was a very good question, and we didn't have the answer back then. So it's really I think a good example of how the discussion and the dialogue with the companies can result in some, I would say, a business friendly regulation.
Thanks a lot. And we have a question from someone named Quentin Porret, but I guess it will be different person, but and who apparently I think is based in the UK. So what he or she is saying that they have a very good relationship and engagement with ACPR and IMF. What you said, which is great. And the worry is about the relations between France and the UK and potentially some of the tensions. So is there any risk or danger for applications of UK-backed businesses with French regulators, and would there be any issues? And I think it's quite a serious question because it was asked by his board potentially as a potential risk.
Well, as a regulator, I will answer, but it's really more a political question, actually. Of course, politics may have some impact on us as regulators, but to date, really, the idea is that we are very open, and we are really looking forward to helping any one of you that want to set up business in France. I don't know what it will be in the coming years. I don't have a crystal ball, but that's it. That's what I can say for today.
Yeah. Thanks, Dimitri. I guess having this kind of discussion also shows the proactiveness of the regulators. And if we go, more than just about regulation, because as an entrepreneur, you have no regulation, of course, but there's a lot of other things. There's about how do you hire people and visas and etc. How does it work? And especially now that we're in a post-Brexit world, how does it work, for example, for visas, and how do we hire people or in France today? And perhaps that's more for you, Thomas.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Rui, for the question. It's a very good question indeed. As the UK is not anymore in the single market and doesn't enjoy anymore the benefits of the freedom movement that it used to enjoy when it was a member of the EU. So we've actually a very good fast track system in terms of visa, since you've mentioned the issue of it. It's actually called the French Tech Visa. So it's a scheme designed to help companies to recruit people and to make them come to France to work. It allows fast-track procedures for investors, entrepreneurs, and their staff. It's a 4-year visa scheme with an automatic extension to your partner, your children. And there is no, and it's quite, perhaps not unique, but it's quite rare that it doesn't require any academic degree. So it's really there to make your life more easier. So yes, I very much encourage everyone to look at it. It's French Tech Visa, and it's designed for you guys.
And so what are the requirements for you to be able to apply to a French Tech Visa? Well,
to be eligible, your company must, of course, fulfill a certain a series of requirements. You have to be registered in France. You have to check one requirement out of a few. For example, you have to be a young innovative enterprise. You have to have received specific state funding for innovation within the last 5 years, or you need to be backed by a French or foreign VC, or you have to be part of a cohort of an accelerator or an incubator in France or in other countries. So it has to show, that you are actually a startup, a tech startup. And you have to, just to apply online, there's a platform. We could, of course, give you the link after the webinar if that's useful. And it does not cost you any sponsorship fee, actually. France does not charge an employee sponsorship fee for this visa scheme, which is also good to know, I assume.
Yeah, I think as an entrepreneur, that's always very good news. And if anyone has any last question, we just have a few minutes left, so don't hesitate to ask your questions, and we'll get the insights of our speakers. Let's finish with a few tips and advice. You know the ecosystem really well. You see entrepreneurs getting into France, both new startups, established startups. Any tips for those entrepreneurs to make it successful when they move to France? And perhaps Domitil, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, my tip would be to get started, actually, and from my regulator hat, my main advice would be not to hesitate to contact us well upstream, actually, in your project, even before you get in France. If you just have the idea, potentially to set up a business in France, you can already contact us, and we'll be very happy to help you through that project.
Thanks a lot, Domitil. And in practical terms, how do they contact you?
Well, you have actually the email address of my team that is available on our website, but I can also put it on the chat so that if anyone in the room is interested, we can follow up the discussion bilaterally after that.
Great, thanks a lot. And Thomas, what about you?
Well, my tip would be to make the most of all the support, all the tools, and all the expertise that is available to you, actually, be it through the French Tech, which is the platform set up by the government with the help, of course, of entrepreneurs and the private sector, and they offer a lot of resources, help to set up your business in France. Business France, of course, is here with us in the UK, the French embassy. So, well, as Cecil said, just get in touch. We have a lot of support to for you. So just don't hesitate.
Thanks a lot. And let me finish with the last question. So I think in terms of the momentum, we're seeing the momentum in the numbers. So numbers don't lie. We know that something is happening in France. Now, if you had to finish on, what is the, let's call that the French difference, for fintech entrepreneurs around the world, for late stage companies, for those companies which want to expand into Europe, what would you call the French difference? And Domitil, would you like to start?
Well, I would say the French way of life with wine and cheese, perhaps. More seriously, I guess but it's also important when you have to set up in a country to have some nice,
Right.
Place of living. And I think France is really ranks quite high in that regard. So that's worth mentioning, I guess. I've already mentioned the ecosystem, but I think it's very important. You can find everything you need here. So that's a huge difference. And from a pure regulatory side, as you will have understood, we really want to make things as simple and as easy possible. So we are committed to facilitate the user experience. You can get in touch with us directly without being intermediated by any type of law firms or whatsoever, which is not the case in all the European countries. So I guess, this is all of this makes the French option quite attractive, I would say.
Thanks a lot, Domitil. And what about you, Thomas?
Well, the French difference, good question. Cheese and wine, it's already taken. I agree with Domitil. But perhaps just to remind everyone that France, will and is actually perhaps the only universal financial center in the EU27. It's something to take into account for setting up your business here. We have a strong domestic market. It's a good way to start addressing the French market and then to strive elsewhere. So we have big corporates as well, big corporates in France. That's also, I think, a strong card that we have, and that fintechs can benefit of. And overall, a very business-friendly environment. Lots of things have changed in France, for the past 5, 6, 7 years. And I hope that you can really much, harness all these resources and supports we're just offering you.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. And I think that's a great way, to finish, this panel. So thanks a lot, to both of you for giving a great overview of what is, the French ecosystem for fintech today, the regulation, the support, for innovation. So thanks a lot again to both of you, and back to you, Treman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. It was very truly insightful discussion. Thank you to Domitil, Thomas, and to Hui. As an entrepreneur in the UK, I've learned a lot, and I received a lot of very good advice. It's now with great pleasure that I will be welcoming our second panel. And the second panel is to give examples from fintech startups and testimonial and actionable advice of how to plan, execute, and grow in France. And we are extremely lucky to welcome Géraldine Gibson, CEO of EQ Metrics, Jean-Marc Nourel, France Country Manager of Checkout, two amazing fintech companies. I would like to welcome them. And we'll be joined also by Arthus Gallia, Hauts-de-France Regional Representative to the UK and Ireland, Director North France Invest, as well as William O'Rourke, lawyer, ORWL avocat. Welcome. I welcome you to join.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So
thank you, Tramhan.
No, thanks. If you want to put your camera on, and so that we can all see you. But it's a great pleasure to welcome you. And before we start, I would like to welcome Géraldine. Géraldine, welcome. I can't see you.
Thank you, Tram, and you have control of my video, so you need to
have control of your video
on.
There is.
Now.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you.
So Géraldine, to give you a little bit of background, so you founded Ecumetrics in 2012. Before creating Ecumetrics, you worked at BAE Systems, the Susquehanna International Group, the Oracle Corporation, and ICL Fujitsu. It was during your time with Susquehanna International Group that Géraldine first worked on the trading floor, an experience that exposed her to the workings of capital markets from both a business and technology perspective. And as a result of this role, she became curious on how to combine risk management and regulatory compliance in an integrated software problem for both the buy and the sell side. So the results of this curiosity was Ecumetrics. You'll talk more about this. So Géraldine, you graduated with a degree in history from Trinity College Dublin and La Sorbonne University Paris. Post-graduation, you studied computer science and technology management before receiving an MBA from the University of College Dublin. I welcome you. I'll welcome also Jean-Marc Nourel, who is the country manager in France for Checkout. Welcome, Jean-Marc. So you've been at Checkout since early 2019. He has over 7 years of experience in the payments industry and previously held position at Mangope as country manager and managed your own company, a crowdfunding platform for students, where he started integrating payment solutions. Also acting as general manager for Checkout's French entity, he's responsible for the company activity in France and Italy, managing operations, relationship with the local regulator, as well as supporting the headcount growth of the commercial development. So you have great expertise in marketplaces and fintech, and Jean-Marc is also providing time to startup through different mentoring programs, and he holds a master's degree in business and marketing from Tech Business School in Paris, also holds an executive training in marketing management from HEC Business School. We know a lot about you, but I think it was important that people know a little bit about your background. And of course, we'll also welcome at a later stage, but Artus Gallia, as well as William O'Rourke to share more about the different aspect of law and the different regulation in place in France. But I would like to start now. And before I start, I want to make it very interactive. And so we have a great audience. And so audience, please, do share your questions. I want to make it very interactive, and please put them, all your questions on the chat. We'll vote them, the ones that you'd like me to ask. Without further ado, because I think it will be interesting to, and the topic of the panel is much more about the how to plan, how to execute, how to grow, with two really great case example. And then after that, the practice or how to from the more on the practicality side at a later stage. But I'll start with you, Géraldine. About Ecumetrics and about you. So you build Ecumetrics, so you're based in Ireland, UK, US, Singapore, and now in France. Could you tell to everyone to know more about Ecumetrics, what you do? And my first question would be to you, how to plan? How have you thought about expanding to France and continental Europe? So I'll start with you, if you can share about the reasons.
Thank you, Tranam. And so how to start, how to plan. I think Domitel had a very good point in the last panel when she said, get going, don't delay, because plans will change. The best laid plans don't always work out. And sometimes you have to change gear as you maneuver through the journey of entrepreneurship, as you know well yourself. So what I say now is the plans that AQmetrics had formed, they are not a blueprint for every entrepreneur who starts their company, because each entrepreneur has their own journey to go on and their own plans to make relevant to their business. To put a little bit of context around AQmetrics before I describe how we plan here, we provide regulatory risk and compliance technology platforms to the investment management and asset management industries. And as you know, the investment management and asset management industries are global. There are a number of spectacular businesses in France in that area, particularly in investment management. But likewise, there are a number of Francophone countries, such as Luxembourg and Belgium and Switzerland, where people speak French and have amazing investment management businesses and asset management businesses. But that made France and Paris quite interesting to AQmetrics because of its central location in Europe. So when we set about looking at the market, as any good entrepreneur will do before they start their business, they will look at the feasibility of the markets that they wish to enter into. And so we considered the US. It is a huge market for anyone serving the investment and asset management industry. We considered the UK because obviously London has a very strong financial services base, and notwithstanding Brexit continues to have that very strong financial services background, and also Europe. And so when we think of Europe at AQmetrics, we planned from 2012 that our European base would in fact sit in Paris. So albeit that 9 years later, we have now some large French customers and large customers in Francophone regions, it was 9 years in the planning to get us to this point where we are now, for want of a better word, a startup in France, because we are not a startup in the UK, we are not a startup in the US, and we are not a startup in Ireland, because our base and our work with clients in these regions has been very deep and protracted for 9 years. But it is 2 years that we have been working with French customers and Luxembourgish customers, and indeed that our head of business development in France joined AQmetrics. So we have a French gentleman, Olivier Halimi, who helps with the development of AQmetrics business in the Francophone regions. So you see the plan started 9 years ago. The execution of the plan took 7 years before we placed the French business development person to look after the Francophone region. And indeed, 7 years before we landed our very large customers in France and Luxembourg and Francophone countries. So my point, Traman, is that although when you're an entrepreneur starting your business, you have what we call the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goals, and ours was indeed to have a strong presence in Francophone markets. It does take time to execute. And I know that one of your questions to me as we go through this would be around the legalities of setting up and what it takes in order to become a presence in France, particularly. And for us, we started with having our French people who represent AQmetrics working from outside of France, in London, in fact, as we entered into the court system to register our branch. And our paperwork is going through the court system to register the branch. It does take time, and most importantly, it does take good advisors. So we use a law firm in France to help us through that. When planning back 9 years ago, the execution of that and the time that it takes to put the paperwork into the courts and establish the branch is not something that we took lightly. So we anticipated that it would take time to do things correctly, because it's very important to do things correctly. Now we're at a point where when our branch has been signed off, We will be hiring people in France, particularly because what we find is our large customers in Paris want support from people who are close to them in the locality of where they are. And so our plan now is to hire in the people to support those customers that we have established a good partnership with over the past 2 years.
No, thanks a lot, Geraldine. So you talk about the plan, which is very important. It took you mentioned about the time. You mentioned about the time, 7 years, and we'll discuss about the legal structure with Artus and William as well later. But it was important that you need to understand, you know, that it takes time. You need structuring. You need help as well and support as well from the local, and we can discuss that as well perhaps later. I want to come now to Jean-Marc with Checkout. You know, you've been in France for quite a while now, and it's the same way. You know, if you could tell us, of course, a little bit more about Checkout in one. A lot of people know, but perhaps to share to audience, you know, what you do, what is Checkout, but more importantly for us would be about expansion in France. How did it work? How did you plan? How long did it take? If you could share that to us. And
yeah,
welcome.
of course. So in a few words, so Checkout is a payment provider. So we are helping fintechs and merchants to accept and process payments, online payments. So we are basically what we call like a gateway, but also an acquirer and a processor. And we have our entity and business operations in France for almost 3 years now. So we actually we have set up our French entity back in 2018. And joining what Geraldine was saying, it is important to indeed prepare everything and be sure that everything is set up, I would say, like on a legal basis, of course, to start operating in the country. So we first came by opening the entity, and then very quickly hired people essentially at commercial level, because we wanted to start talking to merchants. And the opening of our entity also was a reason. Like, there were basically two reasons behind this. First, of course, in the payment industry, France is obviously a big market in Europe. Sometimes the second, sometimes the third, it depends, compared to UK or Germany. But it's actually like indeed a huge market for us. So having operations here was quite logic. And the second point also, and the second reason was, of course, the Brexit topic, because we had to, as a UK company, we had to have a plan B for Europe, basically. And we actually chose France to do so. So we quickly also began a process of getting our EMI license in France, and that's what we did. So the first year of our entity based in France was basically, you know, to start talking to merchants in order to be sure that we were clearly identified as a key player on the local market, which was not like so difficult, because we obviously had our the Checkout brand was actually known by the merchant, so the local presence also helped a lot to go quicker, and at the same time going after our EMI French license to be able to operate across Europe once the Brexit was done. So these are like the first basic, I would say, the first steps that we've done in 2018 and 2019, and now in 2021 we do have now 60 people actually sitting in France in the company. Obviously, a lot of people also looking after the compliance part, legal part, finance part, regulatory reportings, etc., due to our license. But of course, a lot of business operations with commercial and product teams.
Oh, thanks a lot. It's very impressive because you have 18 offices, and then so France was the number 4th, right? If I'm not wrong, you mentioned it to me. So that was
something like that. Indeed. And the thing is, like, it was also actually the first for us. It was actually also the first regulated entity other than in the UK, which was also important for us to actually drive this project, which was really important in order for us to be able to operate in Europe.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We can talk a lot about the plan, and that's why I would like to now have Artus, Gallier. You are the Hauts-de-France representative. Hauts-de-France representative to the UK. For UK fintech companies, Paris is perhaps the obvious destination to expand into France. Could you tell us why fintech companies should choose to go to Hauts-de-France instead?
Yes,
and perhaps, talking about the legal structure, mentioning by Géraldine or Jean-Marc, what would be the typical cost running or plan, the legal structure? How does it work from your side? And I'll ask also the same after that, William, but could you tell us a little bit more on the planification part?
Yep, absolutely. So many questions here. Well, first of all, I'm really glad to join you all here. So thank you very much for inviting me. So my basic message is that location matters, definitely, for fintech businesses who want to access the French and European markets. And from that angle, France is not just about Paris. I mean, that statement applies to pretty much all aspects of the economy and society, but we're just here to talk about fintech. And here it happens that Lille and the Hauts-de-France region are actually the perfect halfway house between Paris and London. So any fintech company wondering whether to stay in London, whether to open activities in Paris, could very well simply set up in Lille, and they would find themselves just an hour and 15 minutes away from London and an hour away from Paris. That's for the general arguments. But basically for a region, for those who are maybe not aware of it, I mean, it's basically a region of 6 million inhabitants, which runs all the way from the north of Paris all the way up to Calais and Dunkirk. And I guess our main asset really is geographical proximity. As I said, I mean, we're really that halfway house between Paris and London, and we're really at the heart of this sort of core economic region. I mean, if you take a 300-kilometer radius around Lille, you have around 78 million people with annual purchasing power of about 1.5 trillion euros. So in terms of access to markets and proximity to markets and your clients, that's really a huge asset. But we're also a very international region. I mean, every 1 of 10 jobs in this region is related to foreign-owned companies. So there's a quite strong international network of companies in this region. And I guess it's also my personal experience, which really testifies to the possibility and all the advantages of having a business in Lille. I mean, I was in London for a day trip on Tuesday. I was in Paris yesterday. I'm going back to Paris next Tuesday, and I'll be in London the day after. So it's pretty much like living in the outskirts of both Paris and London, except that you have affordable housing, which is not too bad for anyone who actually cares about that. So to summarize that, it's really easy to open a new business here with, I mean, and I would definitely second what Geraldine said before about it's very good to sort of do like theoretically perfect plans, but there's a point where you really need to start to get things going and to get someone on the ground to start the work. So from that angle, I mean, we can really help out. I mean, this is exactly my job. And on the cost bit, which you mentioned, I mean, obviously we're much more affordable than big cities like Paris or London. I'll give you specific numbers, but obviously, if you want to discuss anything really specific and tailored to your company, please feel free to get in touch, and I'll be very happy to do that. But basically, on real estate costs themselves, if you take sort of, for every square meter of prime back office, you would pay 240 euros in Lille compared to 670 in Canary Wharf and 490 in Paris La Défense. And for secondhand real estate, you would pay 135 euros per square meter in Arras, which is a city 40 minutes away from Lille, compared to close to 600 euros in Canary Wharf and close to 400 in Paris La Défense. When it comes to HR costs, well, for a site director, you would be thinking of an annual salary of 130k euros in Lille, whereas it would be around 180 in Canary Wharf and 150 in Paris La Défense. For profiles like a sales representative, you would pay around 58k euros in Lille, compared to 87 in Canary Wharf and 64 in Paris La Défense. And for an operator, you would pay just 31k in Lille, compared to 53 in Canary Wharf and 41 in Paris La Défense. So to summarize on that, I mean, if you think of opening a country office in France, if you did that around Lille for a country office of around 10 people with a country manager, 2 supervisors and a variety of profiles, you would be looking at around €500,000 annually, just to run your overall office of around that size. And if you also wanted to open a customer services center, obviously to support your various customers, then I mean, if you think of a center of around 50 people, you would be looking at more or less 1.5 million euros overall to run such quite a sizable core center. So that really shows, I mean, it's really affordable cost. And in addition to that, and that's really the main argument, I mean, you do not need to sacrifice proximity to have affordable costs. That's really one of the main strengths of our region.
Thanks, Arthur. It's very, very insightful, and I've learned a lot. William, we know that as an entrepreneur, we are always cautious about when we expand to a country about the legal costs. I mean, how long does it take? Geraldine mentioned about 7 years, but how long does it really take? What's the duration in general, to set up a legal structure, and how long in practice does it take for companies realistically to go out to get approval, agreement from the regulators? Questions that all entrepreneurs have, when they want to scale, in any particular country. And I know you've done a lot, and you can share, some concrete example. But how long does it take? I mean, if now, as an entrepreneur, we are all conscious about the time, we want to make it fast. Is it possible? Is it doable? And I know you have some example to share with us. Yeah, sure.
Maybe not 7 years as Geraldine told us. I mean, they take time, and they're right, because when you are regulated, if you are a startup or even a bigger company, you obviously need to the planification. It's obviously much more important than if you are doing a business that is not regulated, especially in a world, because my law firm work mainly with not mainly, exclusively with like innovative project and digital project that are doing business in a regulated or just nearby the regulation. So this is why we are doing. Of course, in this environment, in this economic sectors, you have a strong narrative of being the first mover, doing the thing very fast. I mean, we heard from Jean-Marc at Checkout and from Geraldine at Acumagic that obviously when you are regulated, you need to take time, and the planification is very important, because the time spent on the planification, and regarding my job on the planification of how you will be regulated, what is the requirement, what is the spirit of the French regulator, what they expect from you, the time spent before the filing or before the beginning of the application. It's not the time lost, but it's really an investment. So you have to find, and we help our client to find the right trade-off between planify, like do the best planification. Obviously not spending too much time if you are in a competitive business and if you want to target the French market quickly. So this is my first advice will be, especially if you're a startup, be ready to spend and to invest some time in the planification. The regulating procedure are obviously the most time-consuming legal aspect, because creating a company in France, it's something very quickly. It's 100% digital now. So, I mean, if we're just talking about create a business, it can be done in 2 or 3 weeks. without any problem. Regarding the licensing procedure, obviously depend of the licensing. If you are an insurance, if you are a payment services, it takes some time. I mean, it's not the regulator, the French regulators. It's not maybe not the fastest in Europe, but it's not the slowest. It's a big regulator. They have a lot of like very skilled people to deal with your application, and they are invest in the procedure. For instance, if I take just one example, it's Domiti from the IMF told that the latest big regulatory innovation was about the virtual assets, so the cryptocurrency. Who are like in France, we have a very strong, a very like complete and large regulatory regime. The FCA in London have the same one, so we can compare. And in France, they are investing a lot in the regulatory side to help the project and to decrease the time length of this registration. So we have the first one spent like more than 6 or 8 months to be registered, and now we are more around 3 to 4 months, which is very quick and which is very fast compared to even in England. I mean, it's take a lot of time with the FCA, so it is something that could be interesting if you want to target the European market.
Thanks a lot, William. And I see a question for Geraldine. How long did it take to get a branch in place from submitting the freedom of establishment application to your home regulator? So how long did it take for you actually to get a branch from the time you submit, from the application to your home regulator?
Yeah, so I think William's point is well made with regards to the types of branch you set up will dictate how long it takes. So it can take anything from 2 to 3 weeks to a number of years, depending on what you are trying to do. For AQ Metrics, we are a regulated entity. We're a regulated data reporting service provider under ESMA and under the FCA. So all of our authorizations were in place. We've been regulated since the 3rd of January 2018. So that doesn't come into play with regards to what AQ Metrics is seeking when opening a branch. But for other companies, maybe in the payment side, etc., there would need to be an AMF application, and the authorization process there has to be taken into consideration before the branch is opened up. So I think it is very difficult to put a timeline on how long it takes to open a branch. And I think William's point with regards to new startups starting out who have not been regulated and who don't need to be regulated, for those startups, it is most certainly much faster and can take 2 to 3 weeks, as he said.
Thanks, Geraldine. Jean-Marc, you've been now, so you've set up, checkout in France. On the execution side, what are the main steps in expanding to France, and how long does it take to be operational? And my second question would be, what type of strategy did you choose for locating? Did you hire people from checkout headquarters and bring it back, or were you more hiring people from France? And how did you manage to grow the team? So 2 questions.
Yeah, so the first part of the question I would answer by also stating what William and Geraldine were saying. So basically, if you're thinking of our example at checkout, we've basically, so between the time we've set up the entity and by the time we were like fully regulated, like we get our EMI license, it took us something like, I would say, 1 year to 1.5 years. So it was actually a pretty quick process, I would say. It's especially on the fact that we are regulated and we needed like this EMI license. So it was actually like pretty quick. And to answer the second part of your questions, our aim was really to have like I would say like a local entity. And when we say having a local entity, it's not just to say we have like I don't know, like a SAS or SAS or SARL or any type of company in France, and call all the people in the UK or any other country where checkout is, but basically contribute also to the local ecosystem, and it was important for us to get people on the ground, because being regulated in France is very specific. So we needed also, people who were used to work for regulated entities in France by the ACPR in our case. So we had to find people locally, and we basically decided to get our office in Paris, but also another small office in south of France, much more with commercial people, also to be able, to drive business on the south regions of France. So apart from the fact that having a branch or an entity is important, recruiting also on the locally is something I would say way much more important, and it is helping us to drive the business here. As I said, we started, hiring salespeople that were basically our first hiring in France, because we knew we had to start talking to the merchants prior having our license. And we were able to get clients and merchants from France, helping them in other part of the world to basically process their payments. But these were French companies wanted to process payments in other part of the world. So we started hiring salespeople with I would say, like French expertise, and that we did also for compliance people, legal people, finance people, etc., because this is very specific. And now that we have like 19 offices across the globe for now, we are now able, to provide mobilities to our employees. We have a few employees coming who came from London, for instance, but also from other countries where we do have offices. So now is the time to offer this time of mobilities, but at the very first, it was really important for us to hire locally. You're on mute, Tram. You're on mute.
Yes, no, thanks a lot. So you're talking about hiring the team. It is the same as, of course, when you want to scale and you want to come to a country, is about also having some local talent, and how do you hire the talent? And that's probably, Jean-Marc shared about his views about, hiring people locally. What's your view, Geraldine, about that as well, about, your execution plan, hiring your team? How are you going to do, or what's your strategy on that?
Yeah, so I think, I heard earlier Donatelli talking about the wine and the cheese, and I know that Thomas agreed with that in the past session. And I think there's a very important point in culture, right? And French and Irish culture are very, very different, but very, very complementary. So the important thing, I believe, when recruiting, and this stands for whether it's France, whether it's the US, whether it's Singapore, is that diversity and inclusion is so important, and the recognition of cultures and cultural difference is so important. But so too is taking everything that's complementary and similar across those different cultures and bringing the best out of them to form a team that's truly unique. So when we hire at AQ Metrics, we hire for a particular culture that we have here in AQ Metrics that is unique, in my view, to AQ Metrics and is our secret sauce. And so it was very important in every region, irrespective of whether it was France or the US or Singapore or the UK, that the head of that region is hired first, and that the head of that region has all of the cultural things that we value at AQ Metrics, particularly that they absolutely embrace the importance of inclusion and diversity. And that is key. And once they have that, then they will hire the local talent, because they are the people who understand the local culture. Typically, we hire somebody from that region to head up the region, and they understand the culture. But most importantly, they also understand the culture of Acumetrics and make sure that the two things are complementary.
Yep. Yeah, you're totally right. And I want the audience to understand a little bit about the strengths of France, and my questions perhaps to all of you, because you've done, and then William, Arthurs, Jean-Marc, Geraldine, a lot of also companies who have also scale, fintech companies have scale, in France. My question is, does France have the right finance, tech, engineering skills to fulfill the needs of fintech? And what can a fintech startup to do but my question would be on that, about the skills, the talent, as we say. Do you want to elaborate more? I guess I'll ask Artus. I think you wanted to mention, but does France have the right finance, tech, engineering skills to fulfill the needs of fintechs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I believe that's part of what Thomas and Domiti said earlier, about how France has this long tradition of building engineers, finance specialists, mathematicians over the previous decades, if not centuries. So obviously that tradition is really well anchored. I mean, one of our main problems was that most of these highly skilled people ended up going abroad, which is great for the companies for whom they work. But I mean, the bottom line is we definitely have these talents in France, so in Paris, obviously, but in other regions too, in particular in Lille and in the Hauts-de-France region. I mean, basically, we have around 230,000 students in our region, and we train basically 10% of French engineers. So we have quite a solid knowledge base, which can be a very good asset for any fintechs who want to set up here.
You've seen a lot of fintech companies also, Jean-Marc, Geraldine, William, establishing themselves in France. Jean-Marc, what do you think of the people? How do you source, people that wants perhaps to join a fintech company like Checkout? What are the profile of the people? Are there people where did they get, the knowledge? Are there people from finance tech, or perhaps people from totally different background? How do you find them?
So on the first part of what you were saying about like other fintechs, I think it really depends, on the type of I would say the type of office you want to have like locally. You can have like, I would say, like a commercial branch just to be sure you are addressing the market on the business and operation side, or you can be like in a you can have like other needs, as we did at Checkout, with a regulatory and licensing process. So it really depends first on what you want to do in the country that you are expanding. And on the second part of your question, on our side, so we do have a very like various profiles within our entity. As I said, we are regulated, so we have like a lot of compliance, legal, finance, etc. But we also have, of course, commercial, salespeople, customer success, sales engineers, and the product team with developers and like very specific profiles. So the way we are sourcing them is basically, I would say, like kind of normal and easy. We do have people, applying to be part of Checkout. We are also seeking for talents, and we have like a whole team which is doing this internally. But the thing I would like to highlight here is that depending on the growth of each company, it's the way we are seeing it at Checkout is also that we are able to hire people where they are, basically where they are based. If the right talent is in London or Berlin or Barcelona or Paris, then we are basically hiring this person where he or she is. And that's something which is interesting. We are not looking at, absolutely hire the people because we have an office. but we are hiring the talents where they are, and we are relying on the different offices to do so. This would be this would not be. It's not the case when we are talking about like very specific profiles. For instance, where the regulator is saying you have to get these people within your French entity, etc. But if we are talking like about product guys, developers and so on, then we are able to hire them where they are, and that's something like really important.
Okay, super. I'd love to ask you all the questions. It's probably, with, years of experience and what you've seen in the market as well. I'd love to know any gotchas in terms of getting into the France market, anything you wish you've known before you started. Any tips that you could share, to our audience?
I can start, and I think Geraldine talked about it earlier on. Preparation is key, and the tip would be having the right people at the very first. Basically having the right people, at the very first on the ground, helping to build the branch or the entity.
Okay, no, that's good. Any tips, Geraldine or William, Artus?
One thing that I didn't know about when I started to plan for AQmetrics was the existence of Business France. And when I was introduced to Business France, and in fact it was Business France who reached out to me, and I was delighted to be introduced to them, and then that they took the opportunity to come and visit our headquarters here in Ireland and to tell us what they do. The help with regards to networking, finding the right people, lawyers, recruiters, those who could help us in France, was immense. And I wish I had known about the existence of Business France sooner than I did, because it would have helped us go faster. Now, anyone on this webinar obviously knows about the existence of Business France, but there may be other organizations in France who can help. And I think if you're starting your journey, ask the people in Business France who those organizations are, and make sure to talk with them before you set your plans.
Yeah, I agree. They know a lot. They have a huge network of people, and that's a good way, for you to start networking and meeting the people. And any
a pitch on that to respond to your question, Traman. So I would definitely support that, and I think I would add that, I mean, any local region or territory has sort of their own sort of local organizations who are really keen to help, and very often to provide free advice. So it's actually very easy for any company or startup to sort of go on the ground and sort of meet the right people, just to have a sense of how things happen locally and what kind of opportunities they can find. I mean, for example, I mean, we've had one company. One company which set up here a number of years ago is l'Olivier Assurance. So I mean, it's the French branch of Admiral Group, which is quite a big vehicle insurance company, which many of you may know. And basically, they had to choose between 9 different cities in France, and they ended up choosing Lille, actually. And one of the criteria was really having sort of a strong local partners that could be there to support them, in particular on recruitment, because that's a huge issue for all companies, especially fintech companies. And they managed to find the right people. And so today, I mean, despite the fact that they're sort of in the way they manage their business, they have quite solid and high-skilled people for their sort of different call centers. So it's not just standard call centers, but it's centers with people with relatively high skills in insurance, in finance, and the likes. So there are a number of local people who are here to help and very keen to do so.
And what can a fintech startup do to know more about the tech ecosystem in France? Any tips?
If I may say something, yeah. Actually, but it's just the following of what have been said before. It's important to take time to map all the organization and all the help you can have in France for when you want to expand in this market. because in France we have, I think, it is something I have witnessed if you compare to maybe UK or US. We have a very a lot of support can come from the public organizations, such as organization where artists work. It is something very French. Actually, the states really have something from the kingdom. Like the states want to drive and to fuel the economy and even the tech economy. So it is something to have in mind. And you have also a lot of associations which are very dynamic. In every, even in fintech, you have several one depending of what kind of activity you are doing, and be very early on this association. It's I think it's a huge tip to find talent, to find support, to have answer to your question, and to understand the culture and even the regulatory culture of France.
Yes, in London, we do have, for example, level 39, which is where you have all the fintech startups being there to gather together. Where would it be if I was a fintech company? Where would it be a place where we can meet the whole ecosystem? Would you be able to give us some ideas of if we wanted to meet our peers?
Well, I've been speaking for myself, so for the Hauts-de-France region, we have Eura Technologies, which is one of Europe's largest startup incubators, which some of you may know. I mean, it has like close to 4,500 employees, more than 300 startups, 200 projects per year. And it's really the go-to place for our region in terms of any company who's looking for talent in tech. And so obviously it's in Lille, but it has a variety of campuses across the region as well, specializing on a number of issues. I mean, for example, in robotics around the city of Saint-Quentin. But the advantage here is that it really provides for the large pool of talent which many companies, and especially fintech companies, would be looking for and believe it's essential as a criteria when they're looking for a place to set up in.
Excellent. I like to perhaps finish by having another question about what, as we said, early on the previous panel. Any tips for entrepreneurs who would like to come in France? Like France, different, as we said, what's the France difference? Why should an entrepreneur come to France? And how do I make my mark being different from the rest? And I know that France is known for a lot of great things and industries, and we'd love to know more. Perhaps I'll ask who would like to start?
I can start if you want. But me, it has been said even in the previous panel. But first things to understand is that France have changed a lot regarding innovation and tech for maybe the last decade. We have, when I say we, I mean France have understood that it needs to be like more innovative, more supporting, more competitive on the tax side, on the regulatory side. So now, I mean, I have a lot of clients from abroad that are quite surprised because they have heard a lot that France is, there is some French bashing. I mean, mainly from the French themselves because they really like to complain about their beautiful country. But so this is the first lesson. The second one is obviously France. It's I mean, after the Brexit, if you are regulated or a non-regulated company in the UK, France, it's a good door to the single market, but it's a door that is like a serious one. I mean, if you want to expand and to becoming big in Europe and to be with a serious regulator, hire people, be in France or in Lille, and do something serious. I think it's one of the best place to enter into the single market. It's not the easiest one, obviously. We could not. I mean, it's easier in maybe smaller European state member, but it's a good country to doing regulated business, I think.
I would definitely second that and add to it that, I mean, indeed, I mean, France is sometimes known for very complex regulations or high taxes and unstable taxes and regulations and the likes. I mean, Some of it is true to some extent, but the definitive thing, and which definitely improved over the past decade or so, is that where there's a will, there's a way. And there's definitely a will in France today, both at the national level and at the regional level, to really completely embrace the tech revolution and make sure that innovation happens, but not just innovation in an isolated way, but in a way that really benefits to the whole economy and whatever the sectors in which innovation is actually happening. So there's definitely a will there. So whatever obstacles that companies may find, they need to know that they will find people who want to help them and want to make sure that they can make their business a success in France.
And the other thing that I hear from my counterparts who aren't French speaking at all was that 10 years ago, the barrier to entry for non-French speaking companies or people was so much greater than it is today, because the level of English spoken in schools and in business now means that that barrier is gone.
Thanks, Geraldine.
Exactly, and I don't want to speak too much, but to provide one concrete example on exactly what Geraldine said, Booking.com established themselves in Tourcoing, which is near Lille, a few years ago, and their local call center reached around 750 people from 43 different nationalities, speaking close to 30 languages. So it really shows how in Paris, obviously, but also in different regions, like the Hauts-de-France, you do have this kind of sort of local set of talent, international and multilingual talent. So you can look in different places and you will find the right talent you're looking for.
Thanks. I'm looking at questions. So if any of you have any questions you would like to ask our expert speakers, let me know. Very happy because they're available. They have, so I'm looking at the questions, but feel free, to share them on the chat, and then I'll ask them. But no, thanks. It was really, really interesting, to see, how do you plan, how do you execute, how you can get support, from the different governments, the French government, the Business France, or the local also organization that can support any companies in fintech to grow in France. It was really insightful. I would like to finish because I think we had a great discussion and sharing of experience. And I will ask Checkout and also Jean-Marc and also Geraldine from Ecumetrics to perhaps in 1 minute to share what's your plan in the next 2 to 3 years as a company, establishing yourself in France. What's your plan of growth in France?
So the answer would be actually very simple. Now that we have, set up this our entity enable us to to go after the European markets. The aim is mainly to be sure that we are gaining market shares in the different countries. So it will be much more like a product offering expansion and also expansion of our business footprints, commercial footprints in each of the markets. So it's a much more, I would say, commercial and business operation strategy for now for us in France, but also in Europe.
Thanks, Mark.
And for us, very briefly, I do hear artists with regards to Lille and technology talent and how there can be regions outside of Paris worth exploring. And I think we will do that on the technology side in the future. But for the immediate term, we're very focused on Paris because we're working with a number of large financial institutions in the Paris region on how we will support them with people locally to them in Paris. So our initial focus is Paris, but I think as a technology firm, it's very reassuring to know that there is such engineering and technology talent outside of Paris available to firms like ours as well.
Thanks a lot to all of you, to Geraldine, to Jean-Marc, William, Artus, for joining this panel discussion. It was really, really insightful. Now I would like to welcome Marie-Cécile Targe, Chief Operating Officer of Business France, to share a few words. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this really interesting webinar. Thank you also to Rui for your moderation. And I thought many things were said, so I will be really brief to conclude this, this discussion. That was really interesting to read so many things. I would try to summarize in 3 words and come back to what I tried to say in 3 words: size, speed, and service. Many things were said about the size of the French market and how now we have both talents and engineering for fintech to address the French market. And we're really pleased that Cedric O, at the beginning of the webinar, could give a global view on the system and the French tech in France. So I won't come back to that. I think you are convinced, you are all convinced about the size of the French market. The other points I want to remember from the discussion is speed. There were many discussions how to take time to think about the strategy beforehand, planification. You have to really be ready I heard that many times, to be ready, but at the same time, the regulatory framework in France has made it all possible to be speed, even to have speed in the way to resolve the difficulties and to provide the authorization in these regulating activities. I heard that we could now have a few months to register, and it is a real stronger incentive to come to France. So this question of speed and right timing, I think it's something we must remember of those discussions. And the last word I want to emphasize is service. I'm really grateful of North France Invest to be partner of this event, and we could hear that there is great service and support given in the Hauts-de-France to welcome some activities, for example, in back office for fintech. And you can see that local governments are really dedicated to that. I also heard that with William, that an OWL avocat, that there is a strong support to find a way to have a good service to fintech and to establish in France. And to finish, I'm so grateful of Geraldine when I heard that the need she would express is to know about Business France, because of course, Business France is the service provided for all the companies that want to settle in France. We work for the internationalization of the economy, and we are eager to have every kind of services that are needed. Especially, we have the Welcome Office that could answer any kind of questions that you may have considering the coming to France of employees or the establishment of the company. So really, this discussion was really dense. So many things were said, and it's not the first time that a Business France office in London is organizing such a webinar. I think it is really a way to tackle and to give information, also heard from companies that have already established, and it is so interesting to have real life entrepreneurs' views so that we can share examples and good practices. And so, as Geraldine said, now everybody knows the existence of Business France, thanks to this cooperation with the French Embassy, and I'm grateful to Madame l'Ambassadrice to have opened the meeting, and be sure that we'll be happy to follow and to hear every one of you that were in the chat in your projects to come to France. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for joining us to this event. It was a great pleasure. Thank you so much, to Marie-Cécile Tardieu for these remarks, and we hope, to see you in the near future. But thanks a lot for joining, and have a great day.